Hey everybody, Josh Gregory here. This will be one shot, one take, mainly because I'm not techie and I don't like editing videos. So, I want to talk to you today about investing. What would you do if you were 25 again? Or what would I do? What did I do in my early 20s that worked, that was good? What maybe did I do that didn't work that I wish I would have done differently? I've got a friend who's, I think she's 25 and is rocking it, man. And in her side hustle, she just got to the point where she's going to win a car. Not win, but she earned it. And she could either take the car or the payout. And we haven't talked about it yet, but I figured I'd make this video, not just for her, because I know there'll be other people who want to hear this. So if I were 25 and I could be given a car or take that money, I'd have to pay taxes on it. First off, whatever payout you get, I'm sure there's going to be taxes. If I could have the car, look, what would I do? One, a car is not an asset unless it's some kind of antique car, which we're not talking about here. A normal car, as soon as you drive it off the lot, loses value. And every year it loses value. Every day probably it loses some value. It just goes down, 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 down. So if you want to build wealth, thing one I would say is don't put your money in things that are liabilities instead of assets. A car is a liability. All it does is cost money. Oil changes, tires, maintenance, gasoline. Now, cars are necessary, don't get me wrong. But thing one is if I were 25 and I had a reliable car, I wouldn't take a new car. I would take the money and invest it. One of the things that got me and my wife to where we are right now, we're not rich compared to American standards. We're rich compared to, the world and a lot of countries where people don't even have running water. Talk about a perspective adjustment for all of us. But one of the things that got us to this point where there's some financial freedom and flexibility is we both drove used cars, never had a car payment. My car, someday I'm going to do a blog called My Fi Ride, I think, the financial independence, the car that helped lead to that. I drove a car that my coworkers called a roller skate. It was a little Toyota Matrix, which is basically a Corolla hatchback. Used, drove it for 10 years, and it did perfectly fine. And every time I wanted to upgrade that car, when I got really serious about it, I ended up buying a rental property instead. So that is, in my 20s, the single most effective, most important thing I did financially was I didn't waste money on vehicles. Even though I like them, I like cars. I'm a guy. I see cars going down the road, I get excited. But that's thing one. I didn't put an overabundance of money into things that were going to lose value. So how do you invest? That's the next thing to talk about. And there's going to be as many opinions on investing as there are people, probably. You could basically, two things. There's basically two categories that people generally fall into: the stock market investing or real estate. And there's other things. You invest in yourself. If I were young again, I'm still young comparatively, but that's the other thing that people don't think of as an investment. But the greatest return on investment you'll ever get is investing in yourself. But that, take that off the table, because I think it's a given. You invest in your own intelligence, read the right books, talk to people, find good mentors. That's all invaluable. It could 10, 20, 100x your return. But taking that aside and just considering stock market versus real estate, what would I do? I did a little bit of both. But when I started investing, I just gotten out of college. I think I was 23. I wasn't making a ton of money. I was working at a job where there was a match on my investment. It was for the government, so we had this thing called the TSP, Thrift Savings Plan, which was essentially like a 401k for a private company. And my first bit of advice would be, if you're working somewhere where there's any kind of employer match, meaning whatever percent you invest, they match up to a certain portion, I would always invest in the market up to the employer match, because that's an instant 100% return. You're not going to get that anywhere else for zero effort. So what am I talking about? At my job, when I started, up to 5% of whatever I invested, the employer, the government, would match that. So if that was $1,000 a year, I put in 1,000, they match another 1,000. So instantly, I mean, my 1,000 became 2,000 without me doing anything. That's before any stock market returns. So thing one, absolutely, if you have an employer match, use it. Now, what do you invest it in? That's something that there's all kinds of debate about that. There's mutual funds, there's index funds, there's individual stocks. You want a brokerage account, you want a Roth IRA, individual IRA. What do? I don't have time to get into that in this video, but I'll just say this. Make sure you invest it. You could be either more conservative or more growth-minded. My personal opinion, if you have the option, I would put it in a total stock market index fund, something like VTSAX through Vanguard or an S&P 500 fund. What an index fund is versus individual stock investing or versus a mutual fund, the fees are lower, the management fees are lower. You're investing in an entire segment of the stock market. And basically you're saying, I think over the long term, the market, what I'm investing in, whether it's U.S. stocks or international stocks, that's a whole other thing too. But I think long term, the market in general is going to keep going up. I heard one famous investor, prominent investor, say this. If you believe in America, just invest in an index fund. The management fees are super low. So again, something like VTSAX or Fidelity and other companies have their own versions. And stick it in and leave it alone. If you're 25, that portion, you're not planning on using for 50 years. That's one thing I'm glad I did in my 20s. Now, that money that's there is for someday, and it's grown, and it's more than I put in. My wife did the same thing, but she invested way more conservatively and got a much smaller return. That's okay, no problem. But it's there. That hasn't led to any of our current financial freedom. That's for someday down the road, and that's a good thing. So the other thing is, if you're going to invest in the stock market, do something like that, great. I would recommend doing it to some degree. Or real estate. I love real estate personally, and real estate is the vehicle that has contributed more to having freedom in life than any other thing I've done. When I was working at the VA and pastoring and doing other things, I was also buying properties, fixing them up, turning them into rentals. And that's a little tougher in the market the way it is now, So I started investing in the stock market at a trough, at a valley, at a bottom point. And in the same way, housing was way lower than it is now. I mean, the first couple of foreclosures I bought are probably, I don't own them anymore. I sold them a while back. But those two, they're probably worth 3 to 4 times what I paid. I wish I kept them, but I couldn't. So let's say you invest some of your money in the stock market, and now you're thinking, I want something for more the midterm, 5 years from now, not 50 years from now, 10 years from now, not 50 years from now. I think real estate's a terrific investment if you do it right. But again, most people, they think of their house as an asset, but in reality, the way they structure it, it's a liability. So a couple options. Either buy something that you can add value to. That's a value add property. In other words, you buy something, you can put in $20,000 after you buy it, and that will add $40,000 in value or in equity. That's one option. The other option is to buy something in house hack. I didn't even know that term, and I was doing it without ever hearing the term. But basically, buy a house, rent out a couple of the bedrooms, get a couple of roommates. It'll be fun anyway. That's another option. Or you could just buy a house, live in it long enough. You're getting a lot of tax benefits. You're getting depreciation. Depending on what kind of property it is, there's other benefits. And, over the long haul, years down the road, this market, maybe 2 years, maybe 5 years, your house is going to be worth a lot more than it was when you bought it. Maybe 10 years. But you need a place to live anyway. And it's going to be increasing in value. So 10 minutes of rambling, sum up what I said. Stock market or real estate investing, I would do both. And I would be sure to expose yourself to people that have done it. Now, I'm not a stock market investing expert, and I don't know if I'd call myself a real estate investing expert, but I've got quite a bit of experience in it and have learned a lot and have made some foolish mistakes as part of the learning process that, I still learn from today. So doing it over again, if I could only pick one, me personally, it would be real estate, hands down. But I would do both. Hey, hope you guys have a good day. If this is helpful, let me know. If you want me to make other videos, similar topics, let me know.